From Software was not something I ever expected to be waxing on. In truth, From Software games were not something I ever expected to be conscious of. In fact, if we built a time machine, traveled back to 2014, and showed 2014 me a list of all three of these things, love, running, and From Software, and asked me to guess a potential category uniting these disparate words, 2014 me's answer might have been something like, things you'll never catch me doing. It's not that I didn't grow up with video games. I had an NES and a Game Boy Color and an Xbox. I occasionally played games socially with some high school friends, which involved the usual 90s kids rotations, GoldenEye, Smash Bros., Rock Band. I even had a couple friends who played a lot of video games. I never had an in-depth conversation with any of them about it. Video games combined two of my least favorite things: difficulty and failure. Running is much the same story. I played many sports, and I played them pretty well up through the end of high school. And yet I hated running. Game time occasionally required me to turn on the speed, which I could do fairly easily and with moderate success when motivated. But beyond that, I did not want to run. I could deliver when I needed to. What good would more running do me? Running combined another two of my least favorite things: exertion and improvement. And love, well, I was privately obsessed with love, but the fictional kind, the kind where things could be scripted and plotted out, where dialogue could be pithy and subtext was always clear. In my fantasies, there was only me and my background and my worldview and my mindset. Only me and my flaws and my oddities. Only me and my polished versions of myself projected onto someone else's face. Real people were unpredictable and impenetrable, and it turned out I was less capable of communicating in real life than I was in my mind. By the time I was old enough to be interested in love, my circumstances had taught me to bury my private self away in the safety of fantasies, so I had no chance at ever being in love in real life. Love combined yet another two of my least favorite things: discomfort and vulnerability. But what does all this have to do with From Software? Now, as a disclaimer before we go on, don't get it twisted. I am not the From Software expert in this show. Far from it. There is a man here who made his own From Software t-shirt. A man who must have at least one FromSoft game going on at any given moment in time. A man who waits in jaded agony for the day they will finally, mercifully give the people what they really want, which is Bloodborne in 60 FPS. No, the FromSoft expert in this show is M. And it was M who introduced me to running, From Software, and love. There is one thing everyone talks about when they talk about FromSoft games: dying. Dying is the only thing people who've never played the games register as unique about FromSoft games. As the New Yorker put it, death is a feature of these games, not a bug. You are going to die a lot, to such an extent and under such dire circumstances that it is not an annoyance you can merely endure. You better find some way to learn to love dying. But most video games rely on some form of death as a central feature. After all, video games at their core are an experimental playground of learning. They are active entertainment. The point of video games is to fail, with stakes sometimes so high that the failure is dying, but with the guarantee of safety to your actual physical person. From Software is not unique in this respect. Even cozy games like Stardew Valley have forms of death consequences, literal and metaphorical. You can run out of health in the mines, simple. Or you can realize on the last day of fall that you need an eel for the community center, and you can only catch eels in the ocean between 4 p.m. and 2 a.m. when it's raining in spring and fall. And today it's sunny. So now you won't be able to catch one until spring rolls around again. There are consequences for your actions in video games, including dying. The beauty and the point of video games is that you get to try again with the information you've just learned. What I talk about when I talk about FromSoft games is everyone's second favorite D word: difficulty. Death in FromSoft games isn't just respawning at the last checkpoint and starting over. It is a karmic sentencing. Often what you have just done is a grueling journey through a nightmare area filled with hostile enemies ending in a David v. Goliath 1v1 boss fight. And now you must do it again. The repetition is difficult because the original task is difficult. Areas are complex. Routes through them are labyrinthine. Enemies are grueling. The bosses are crazy OP, though they all have their weak spots. Each portion of the journey requires many rounds of dying to even know what the fuck is going on. You must first learn what you have to do, which takes time and focus and dying. Then you must calculate a best way to do it, which also takes time and focus and dying. And then as the product of that time, focus, analysis, sheer persistence, and all that fucking dying you did, you must at some point simply just do it successfully so that you can move on to the next death gauntlet and start the process all over again. The extreme difficulty of FromSoft games was very daunting to me. I was not used to having to try so hard or fail so many times. See, from an early age, people told me how smart I was. And they weren't wrong. The proteins that arranged themselves into my DNA happened to come with a high intelligence quotient, at least as determined and measurable by Western humans. People told me I was smart and capable and mature, which ultimately meant that adults mostly left me alone, sure I would figure it out on my own. Because I was capable of putting in low to no effort to achieve better than average results in most things I tried, I missed out on developing a crucial skill. I missed out on learning how to learn. Learning became a zero-sum game to me. Either I tried something and could do it pretty immediately with relative success and with little assistance, or I tried it and failed, and the skill or subject in question was filed under things I do not do. If you only know success and failure, you not only miss out on the enormous gradient of experience that connects them, but you do not learn how to get from failure to success. FromSoft is one extreme of some weird spectrum where it is diametrically opposed to running. Running is also repetitive. Running is also enduring and persisting. Running is a matter of resilience, the ability to pick yourself up and keep going despite any number of contextual factors that make it harder to do so. Weather, distance, energy, mental fortitude. When I met M for the first time, he was born to run pilled and introduced me to barefoot shoes and their connection to ancient human design, as well as the simple and oft-repeated idea that first started to change the way I thought about running. Running is actually simple. All you need are shoes, and you can run almost anywhere. I still wasn't sold. I was living in Brooklyn at the time and walked almost everywhere, and that was enough for me. But a year later, when I moved out to Los Angeles, where no one walks anywhere, I needed something to keep my body moving. M had wormed the idea of running into my brain, but I am a contrarian asshole, so I was still not sold on the idea, and I refused to read Born to Run because I read a lot, and I wanted M to take one of my book recommendations first. So when I found out that one of my favorite authors, Haruki Murakami, had written a nonfiction book entitled What I Talk About When I Talk About Running, I decided to let him convince me to run, and he did. How Murakami convinced me to start running was also extremely simple. He told me I didn't have to run faster than anybody else, and I didn't have to be good at or even that serious about running. All I had to do to run was run. I am a notorious overthinker, so while it seems insultingly simple to admit, what Murakami gave me was permission not to overthink, and permission to fail or be mediocre. The only thing I had to do was do it. No more, no less. No competition, no failure, little difficulty. So I bought my first pair of barefoot running shoes and dove in. I started running, outside, easy-paced. Running was not the hard part. Running is a simple, repetitive motion. This is what makes it diametrically opposed to Soulsborne's. The task is easy. The hard parts of running were, 1, actually sticking to it, and 2, facing down all the feelings that running brought up. In order to learn how to run, I had to learn how to negotiate with my mind, to keep it focused, to keep the terror out of it, to lean into a simple task as a way of quieting my loud and overpowering internal monologue. I had to learn how to assess the personal components that must align to make running possible. Body, mind, anima. I had to learn how to push past disappointing myself, how to attend to tiny details that made the large thing possible. I had to learn how to work with the circumstances I was given, no matter how out of my control they were. And I was able to learn all of this by just showing up and running, time after time, week after week, month after month, year after year. This September, I will have been running for 10 years. Not perfectly, not extraordinarily, but consistently, and with lots to show for it. Complexity is merely the sum of an equation. End results, answers on their own, often look simple because they are. They are icebergs, and what we see is such a small fraction of what's been built up to get there. Running is undeniably simple and quietly complex, and From Software is undeniably difficult and quietly simple. But love, quiet, simple, complex, undeniable love, is what got me into both of them. I've spent most of my life feeling lonely. It's apparent in all the journals I've had since I was 15. I've had friends, and a very select few of them have become my chosen family, but I have always felt a pretty wide gap between me and most other people I meet. I don't seem to be driven by the same things as them. I don't seem to respond to the same things as them. Most of the time, I don't even seem to like the same things as them. And I never felt very comfortable around most of them. Things never felt easy right off the bat. It was the first thing that struck me when I met M. Within days of meeting him, I felt inexplicably at ease. Felt an immediate, but quiet and simple and deep connection to him that was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. Pages and pages in my journal from that time spent talking about how bizarre this connection was, and how I was probably making it up. Of course, I know the ending now, how simple it really was. We were falling in love, or were somehow already in love. But that didn't mean it was easy, and that didn't mean the equation was already solved. Complexity has to be combated with understanding. To be understood, the answer must be broken down into its parts. And we spent a lot of time breaking this thing down into parts. First artistically, then as a friendship, and finally as something more. My fantasies about love were never fantastical. I didn't fantasize about weddings or babies or dramatic declarations of passion and undying fervor. I was obsessed with the mechanics of love, with the mundanity of it, how it was supposed to be a bedrock you built your life on, the framework of your days. My fantasy was that someday someone could know me. Not just answer me sitting high and simple above the waves, but iceberg me. My full, messy, repetitive, mundane, complicated equation. That they could truly know me and still love me. Love me in spite of knowing me. Love me because they knew me. That they could know me that intimately and still want to spend all their time with me, doing nothing but living, doing nothing but all the things you have to do in a day. And that I could do the same. And that our mundane lives would be enriched by the other's presence. My first encounter with FromSoft was as audience to M's first encounter with his other true love, Bloodborne. I spent significant time watching him play right when our relationship was also developing seriously. If there's one thing about M, which you will come to know, he processes things out loud and is also a great teacher. So watching him play was less passive than it might have been watching someone else. More than just bearing witness to the trials and tribulations of a Soulsborne, I was also receiving a crash course in how to think about and through these games. I never understood why people were obsessed with running, or with video games, or with love, at least the way I saw most people doing it. But the love I had for M, and the love he showed to me, convinced me to try. Love is a great motivator. And it doesn't have to be romantic, and it doesn't even have to be directed at a person. Love is interest. Love is curiosity. Love is being open to learning how to understand something outside of yourself, and by doing so, coming to understand infinite things inside yourself. This is life, and how we experience time, as a repetition in service of meaning. Every day we respawn at some bonfire and have to make our way in this world all over again. Failure is the beginning of learning to try again. Sometimes the game is easy. Oftentimes it is hard. There are so many things that you will be cut off from if you are not capable of learning. You shrink yourself every time you shy away from difficulty because when things get hard, you have to learn. And every time you show up to learn something, you expand what you know to be possible, mainly within yourself. Learning will kill many things you thought you knew, but not learning will kill you faster. A decade later, I still, even now, having finished 3 Soulsborne games myself and currently playing another, I don't always understand why some people seem to relish in putting themselves through the heart-thumping, hair-tearing, mind-numbing stress that is FromSoft. But what I talk about when I talk about FromSoft, or when I talk about running, or when I talk about love, is learning to love learning, especially when it kills you.